G'day, Ziggy here, author of Money Does Grow on Trees, and welcome to episode 9 of my podcast, Plan to Prosper. On today's episode, we're going to be talking all things property with Director of Property at 3P, Mr. Chris Gatt. So, enjoy the episode. All right, Chris Gatt, welcome back to the podcast, Plan to Prosper.
Thank you.
Now, we had you last time, we were talking about finance and all things loans and debt, and we really unpacked that. We gave tips and traps to people. We want to do the same thing when it comes to property because you're director of property here at 3P and you're a fully licensed real estate agent.
That's right.
And so when it comes to property, you can help clients with all things in the purchase of property, in the selling of property, and in the managing of property. So it's fair to say you'd be an expert in property. I mean, do we go that far?
I'd like to say so myself, yeah.
We like experts.
Yeah.
We like experts here. Pippi likes experts. We love experts. Okay, so let's talk about investment properties to begin with when it comes to investing. What are some of the due diligence, or what are some of the things you do? Because when it comes to investing, we're talking about capital growth. Now, the income side is very important. So, you know, for people, there's to understand there's the two aspects to an investment property, or most investments should have two aspects to it. There's the income side, and then there's the capital value increase or the capital growth side.
Yeah.
So on a property, it's the rental income. That's the rental.
Right.
It's the income return, and then we've got capital growth. What's the due diligence around that? What do we go through that when we're talking to clients and looking for an investment property for clients?
I think the key, and we mentioned it last time around, is getting your strategy right. Again, the best investment property for you might not be the best investment property for me. So understanding what you want to get out of that property over the next X amount of years is probably the perfect starting point. And a lot of our clients really hone in on, having a really strong rental return. The reality is how you make your best money out of property is by capital growth. So really your focus should be capital growth, managing your cash flow, but focusing on capital growth. So then there's a few key aspects that you need to understand when you're buying a property as to what might help you obtain capital growth and what might not get any capital growth. And I think the two really quick and easy ones are land content. So if you look at a property value over years as they go by, it's actually the land that's appreciating in value because the building depreciates. So that the building's becoming older, needs repair, less valuable. But when property prices are going up, even if that building is depreciating, it's the land content that's appreciating. So if you don't have any land content, chances are you're not going to get any growth. That's probably the number one thing that you can take away from investing in property. Secondly, it's infrastructure. And it doesn't necessarily need to be infrastructure that's already in place. When we say infrastructure, we're talking train stations or public transport in general. It might be access to schools. It might be access to shopping centres, all those types of things. So if sometimes when there's actual facilities in place already, you might have missed the boat in terms of potential capital growth. But if you're buying in an area where there's a proposed train station or proposed shopping centre, you might not see that value immediately, but in 5 years' time, you'll see it when they put that train station in. So
now there's been a lot of proposed shopping centres and train stations in Western Brisbane.
This is true,
right?
This is true,
and they're still waiting.
Yeah,
they're still waiting. I mean, I know that's a hard one to sort of because when the developer and the marketing people tell you, look, this is in, that's what's going to happen, that's the plans, and that's all well and good with the plans, but here we are sitting on a lot of them. We're seeing a lot of those clients that have purchased, properties out there that have got a lot of land. 7 years down the track, and they haven't grown at all, or they've gone backwards, and that hasn't eventuated.
Yeah, and there's got to be some common sense with it as well. So if you're buying in an area where maybe 3 or 4 kilometres in, there is a train line, there is a train station, as those next suburbs get built out, in time they'll need to put a train station in to help people commute. So whereas if you're buying in an area where in and around 10 kilometres there's no train station, there could be a problem.
And that's why I think when it comes to the due diligence is you can speak to council. Right?
Absolutely.
I mean, we've got so much access to information these days. You can speak to council and just don't rely on the word of a marketing person.
Most
with
definitely.
respect. And you can speak to council and say, okay, no, we are planning, but it's 5 years away. Hang on, the marketing person told me it was 2 years away.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you can still decide whether you proceed with that investment. I want to come back to land because, you go 80 k's out of any major city here and you'll find plenty of land.
Yep.
But that may not necessarily give you the growth that you need in the future.
Yeah, the other part about when we talk infrastructure is having different employment opportunities available, because you can have land, but if people don't want to go there to work or can't go there to work, they're not going to live there, so there's no demand. So you've got to also be in an area whereby there's a lot of diversity in employment, because that's going to attract people to that specific location, and then off the back of that, then there's going to be development, whether that's work opportunities or those public transport opportunities. So that it also needs to be in an area and a city where there's a lot of diversity for employment, to make sure that you're safeguarded and not, reliant on one type of a market or another.
Yeah. Most of it's common sense, isn't it, Chris?
You would think.
Yeah.
You would think. But I mean, and for some people it may not be common sense, that's no problems. But as long as you're speaking to the right people who are going to share that information and educate you. So it's really important with property investment. If you get that first decision wrong, it can set you back 10, 15, 20 years and you're playing catch up. And then sometimes it's a bit like people who gamble, they've lost some money and they're sort of chasing their money.
I'll get it back.
I'll get it back, get it back. And the decisions that they're making aren't right from that point on. It's the same with property. You can make a decision that's incorrect first up, and then the following decisions aren't the right ones to get you out and get you on the road again. So that first decision you make is crucial in terms of setting you up long term. And
from a financial planning perspective, I'm seeing two areas when it comes to investment properties that I think could have been avoided. Right, one is the clients who have purchased 7 or 8 years ago, and maybe you've got a couple of investment properties, and are now saying, well, look, we're 10 years away from retirement. Do we sell these now, or do we hold on to them and hope that the next 10 years are going to be better than the last 10? And so part of that analysis is showing them two scenarios. And one is, if you retain them, if you stay with them, and let's use an average rate of growth, this is what your position is going to look like in 10 years' time in retirement. If you were to sell them, what would you then do with the cash flow that you're now not paying towards? If it went into superannuation or another investment, does that put you in a better position?
That's right.
And that's important, because there are some times where you've just got to cut things off and move on and walk away. I'm sure you've seen that quite a bit.
Absolutely. That's easier said than done. Emotionally, we don't want to lose money. That's how we're built.
Yeah.
But sometimes, as you say, cutting your losses and moving on is probably the best thing you can do, and it allows you to recalibrate and move forward. We have seen that a lot. We've had a lot of clients who have come to us over the years whereby they might have purchased an apartment, no land content, and they've bought it on the principle of the location. It might be a really good suburb which has a lot of key indicators that are really good, but it might have all that amenity in place that we were talking about earlier with public transport, shopping complexes, so on and so forth, but there's no land content. So they haven't purchased the property because of that individual property. They've purchased it because of the location that they've been sold, and that doesn't work. We've encountered a lot of clients who might have purchased something 10 years down the track. They might be looking at selling it at a loss, and it staggers them.
Yeah, it's hard to.
And then it's a matter of, let's hold on for another 2 or 3 years to try and get our money back. It's probably never going to come back, and then you're 13 years down the track instead of 10 years down the track. So sometimes it's a bitter pill to swallow, but if you can swallow it and move on, it's probably the best thing moving forward.
And I know we're based in Melbourne, but you take something like Sydney market, which is just crazy, right? I mean, it almost defies all logic. I remember a current client who her property advisor recommended that they buy this one better in Sydney, 3 k's from the middle of town, and it was I think it was about 480,000 at the time. And I just remember thinking, really, that's a lot. And the advisor's telling me, trust me.
Yeah.
Here we are 10 years later, and it's almost $1 million.
Yeah.
I mean, that just defies sort of logic, but the demand is so great, and Sydney's just, it's almost like its own world, isn't it?
And if you're going to buy property in Sydney, there's not a lot of people that can buy houses.
Yeah.
It's apartments and apartments only. So the market share is bigger in terms of potential buyers, which is probably that old supply demand. If there's enough demand, then it doesn't matter what you have. Maybe that supply is going to work.
So what about in terms of purchasing an investment property? So you've got the two options, if you like. You can go out there to the market and, go to auctions and
Yep.
try your luck out there if you like. And a lot of people do that, and that's a great way of getting into the property market. What about using developers or sourcing investment properties via developers and sort of, is it wholesale level or whatever it is? But talk through that in terms of what we should be careful of.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong in either of those ways to go about it. It's just understanding what you might get out of each scenario. So buying an established property at auction can most definitely work. You need to know the property you're buying, what condition it's in, because most likely an established property, depending on its age, will need some work, in the years moving forward. So if you buy a property that's 8 to 10 years old, pretty good condition now, you got to think, I'm going to hold this property for 7 to 10 years to make my money out of it. So the back end of my cycle, this property is going to be about 20 years old. So what type of condition might that be in? What works might I need to do to it to upkeep it and keep it in the condition that it needs to be, particularly if it's a rental property and all the compliance that's in place now. So that needs to be consideration. On the flip side, when you're buying off a developer or off the plan, you're not actually buying a property, you're buying a vision. So you need to be very, very careful that the vision that you're being sold is something that aligns with what you're looking to achieve over that period of time. So not to say that it doesn't work, but you just need to be buying the right property in the right area and dealing with the right developer or advisor to make sure they've got your best interests at heart. Again, does the property have land content? What type of land content does it have? Are there these key amenities in place that are going to drive population to want to live there and work there? Is there a lot of diversity in employment opportunity? If there's no infrastructure in place, is it coming soon? Is it planned? All these things will help you make that right decision so that you can get the most out of your investment.
It has the added difference of you're buying something that's established. I can see it, I can touch it, I can see where the termites have gone through the floor or anything like that, as opposed to something that hasn't been built.
Yeah.
How do I know, the quality of it, that sort of thing? So there's a lot more things to take into account.
Yeah, I think if you get that part right,
Yeah.
you can probably do a lot better out of it, because generally if you're buying brand new, areas are still being developed, so you can sort of ride on the coattails of all of that infrastructure that comes into play. But again, you got some depreciation aspects that you can sort of factor into account from a tax perspective. Again, in 10 years' time, that brand new property is 10 years old versus 20 years old, probably more attractive to the next buyer on the market, because do you want to buy a property that's 10 years old or 20 years old? People will go that younger property because there's going to be less issues. So there are definitely some pitfalls with buying off the plan, but if you do it correctly, I think it can be done, quite well for the investor.
And affordability is important, because when it comes to cash flow, we're all on budgets, we're all tight when it comes to cash flow. So if I can hold an investment property that's going to cost me less than another one, and I know I can hold it for 10 years, even if let's say they both double in value over that period, the one that's cost me less to hold has been a better investment.
Absolutely.
As opposed to the other one. And in some cases, I may be able to purchase that one and then maybe a second one for, in some cases, the same amount of money from a cash flow perspective. Or I can purchase that one and then use the cash that I'm saving, which I would have paid over in this older one that doesn't have some of the depreciation benefits. I can put that towards another investment or a superannuation, and so you're creating more wealth that way.
Yeah, and that's why strategy is important. So rather than getting as hard as it is, the less emotion you have attached to buying that property, the better, because a lot of people will go and see a property, fall in love with it, whether it's established or off the plan, and then want to buy it without understanding what that does to their financial situation. So if you do it the other way around, look at numbers, understand your strategy, have a really clear understanding of what you're wanting to achieve, and then you can essentially go plug certain investment properties into those scenarios and have a look at them, so that when you're looking at property, you know the numbers, you know the strategy. If you like it, it's not an emotional decision. It's a decision based on the numbers, and hopefully that'll get you a better return over time.
And we've worked together when it comes to, clients. We sit around as their advisors acting in their best interest. So we've got the accountant on the tax side, myself on the planning, you on the finance and the property, and obviously the lawyer who can come in and look after the contract. But if everyone is looking at them from their specialty, from that angle, then 9 times out of 10 you're going to be able to consider everything.
Correct,
and that strategy is important. So I love that part of that.
Minimises the chance of making the wrong decision.
Yep, it does. Okay, The different types of property. So we got, what do we got? Residential. What else?
Yeah, you got residential, you got commercial. Within those two categories, there's different types of property. So we touched on apartments, we touched on established houses, there's townhouses, there's house and land packages, locations. You can talk Metro Melbourne, regional Victoria, across the country. So different markets right across the country are doing different things. So there's a lot of different types of properties and price points to consider. It's not just about saying I want to buy a residential property. It's where do you want to buy it, what do you want to spend, what do you want to get out of it. Then on the commercial side as well, there's a lot of different types of commercial properties, whether that be offices, warehouses, all kinds of
Retail
things.
shop fronts.
Retail shop fronts. There's pros and cons to everything. As we've seen maybe since COVID, there's been a real shift in how businesses are using office space. So you need to be careful. While there might be good returns if and when there's tenants in the property, the risk of having a tenant out of the property for a longer period is far greater with that type of property compared to maybe a residential. So again, understanding your personal scenario, understanding how you can manage your cash flow if it's not occupied is really important part of your decision-making process.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Okay. What about when it comes to the rental of these properties, right? So you look after the rental for our clients, you manage that process. Like that's just not getting a fee or giving the cheapest fee for collecting the rent. Well, what's involved? What else is involved?
Is this a 1 hour podcast?
Yeah. 25, 30 minutes, is that right?
Yeah, look.
Pippi's already rushing it. She's going,
right.
I need to wind this up.
There's a lot that goes into managing a property. And number one is people and investors that we've seen who choose to self-manage to save essentially $1,000 a year, give or take. Biggest mistake you can make in your life because you need to be on top of all the legislation, compliance, and then when
you mean the old Italian and the Greek that used to have the property and go around and collect the rent and get the cash and never fixed anything? Sorry, no, not to be defamatory.
Yeah,
I'm Greek, so I can say that.
Yeah.
Those days are gone?
That's why we're where we are now with compliance. Those old European investors, which I've got that bloodline as well. But there's just so many things that can go wrong that managing it yourself, if you don't have the experts, managing it on your behalf, when things go wrong, that's what you pay the money for. A lot of people say, well, all you're doing is collecting my rent. The rent comes on time and, and so on and so forth, which is true. It's when something goes wrong that you want those professionals behind you so it can be acted on swiftly and in the right manner. So, property management consumes 80% of our time and is, we've got a really big team who are, really qualified and well drilled at what we do.
Love our team.
Fantastic
Love
team.
our team.
A lot of hard work, but it sort of works really well. We get a lot of clients trying to see whether, can you, drop your property management fees by 1%, which is essentially maybe $3 a week. And yes, we could. I'm not saying that we can't, but if we dropped it by $3 every week for every client, then we're losing a lot of money, and then we can't provide that quality service.
Yep.
I think what's more important as an investor, rather than trying to save $3 a week, it's choosing a property management company that are actually going to act in your best interest and making sure that they're maximising your rental yield. Are you getting that extra $60, $70, $80 a week compared to what the other agent's getting you? You're going to be far in front from a cash flow perspective doing it that way. Are they inspecting your property twice a year? Are they on top of maintenance when they're minor issues before they become major issues? So the focus really should be a holistic focus when you're choosing a property management company. Yes, you want to take into account what they're charging, but what are you getting and what's their track record? Because you might pay a little bit more, but you're going to make a lot more on the back end if you choose wisely.
And if you're wanting to develop a relationship with someone, I mean, it's not off to a good start.
Yeah.
If you're trying to screw them on price,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's I never want to do that. I don't. But on the other hand, when clients want to do that, I just say, look, if I've got to compromise on the price, I've got to compromise on the value of the service, and I'm not prepared to do that.
Yeah,
right?
and what we tell our clients is we don't go to the market to try and be the cheapest. We don't want to be the most expensive, but we want to give you the greatest value for money. Whatever your fees are, if you feel like you're getting great value for money, then everybody's happy. So I think that's really important in your selection process as an investor, making sure that you trust the people who are in charge of that property to help it do what it should do over that 7 to 10 year period for you.
Yep, awesome. Okay, so as we're sort of winding up the episode for today in terms of property. Now, we've talked previously to you on about finance. Let's bring those two together and sort of wrap that up and link it up, right? So when you're sourcing an investment property for clients, and I know we've worked on clients together before where our team has done the financial plan and we come to you and we get some calculations around their borrowing capacity. Are they able to do this, or are they able to buy an investment property, or maybe a client recently wanted to buy an investment property and also refinance their home, and maybe look at buying a home that's bigger.
Yep.
They got a growing family, and so those type of scenarios, it works well when you've got a strategy, but then also you take that strategy, you've helped with those calculations, and now you're taking it and you're connecting the property and the finance together.
Yeah, well, you can't do one without the other. So that's the key. If you want to buy a property, you need finance 99% of the time. So that's where understanding your borrowing capacities and your finances first off before you look at property is important. Building a strategy in line with those finances that you can obtain, and then looking at property as, I guess, the last piece of the puzzle. We then prepare what we call property investment analysis reports, where we'll do cash flow projections and run through absolutely every potential scenario in terms of income, expense, put a whole load of assumptions in there, share those assumptions with our clients. They might say to us, look, you're being a little bit over-optimistic here or a little bit too careful there. So we can adjust our reports to that specific client's risk appetite and then show them what those numbers would look like if they buy property A, B or C. And it gives them a really clear picture from a finance perspective that, okay, if I buy this property, I can expect, all things being equal, that I'll get this type of capital growth. And in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, this is what the property will be worth. This is a type of rent I can probably expect. So you go into that investment with a really clear idea of what to hope to obtain. And again, it gives you an educated look and it minimises the risk, and hopefully that leads to it being the right decision.
Okay, so we've come to the end. Now, what I've realised is we didn't share a joke.
No.
Got any property jokes or any finance jokes?
No.
All right.
No.
Any jokes? Hey, I've got one. All right. It's not property related, but it's quite the opposite. Actually, maybe we can just sort of do a few sentences on this, right? How do you make $1 million on the share market? Start with 2 million. Now, it's interesting. Now you've got a property focus. There's shares from a diversification perspective. We're Aussies. We love property, right? But it is important to diversify. I'm talking about from a planning perspective here. But you've seen, I imagine, clients that have property, but they've also got other investments, right?
Absolutely. We've seen both ends of the spectrum. We've seen clients buy 3 apartments in one building at the same time.
Right.
Which is, just red
No
flag.
diversification.
Absolutely not, other than apartment number.
Yeah.
But, that's a red flag. Not only do we think it won't perform being an apartment, but all of your eggs into one basket. So, it's really important that you do diversify not only, the type of property, but the type of investment. So, having some shares and managed funds, all those types of things, it means that you sort of mitigate your risk, and generally those people who sort of have that spread perform better over time.
And just to finish off, that was a joke, but it's not true. Because, having said that, if you're speculating and you, that could happen. But whether it's property, whether it's shares, we're talking about blue chip investments where the due diligence has been done, where the research has been done, and you're not from a property perspective, you're not buying 100 Ks out. That's too far, and as you said before, there's no infrastructure. And from a shares perspective, you're not buying some penny dreadful mining company at 2 cents. So either way, it's about getting proper advice, and we'll end on that note. But thanks for coming in today. I've really enjoyed our chat when it comes to property, and I look forward to getting on again and doing some more specific stuff for our viewers and audience out there, and even for our clients. So good to see you again.
Maybe we could do a roadshow at some point in time.
Maybe we could do it in Greece. Pippi, we're going to do something in Greece. 3P in Greece. Pippi's going to start 3P Santorini. All right, that'll be our Greece connection.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode. Talk soon.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion with Chris Gatt on all things property. I hope it was valuable to you. Now you know all about property, so go out there and invest. No, don't go out there. Get advice. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll see you on the next one.